How does a corporation set about issuing bonds? Bonds represent a way for corporations to raise money. As such, they must be controlled by financial regulations. The most important thing to remember is that issuing a bond is a transaction. Therefore, there should be documentation to record the transaction. Consider what the information should be on the paper that records that transaction. Any transaction records the names of the parties involved, the date of the transaction, and the amount for the transaction. A bond issue needs to record additional information to ensure that terms and conditions are clearly stated. The time over which the bond is active is recorded, as is any rate of return where interest is paid. There may be other conditions, such as those required for callable bonds and those required for convertible bonds. It all sounds so easy. Why do people say bonds are a difficult subject? We have mentioned the element of risk, but have not talked about the risk of prediction. If you would buy a bond that has a maturity value of $500,000 in 10 years, how much do you pay for it? It's a bit like saying, if you had $500,000 today, how much money would you need to have the same purchasing value in 10 years' time? Except that here we are asking the question in reverse. Clearly, you did not pay $500,000 for the bond if there were no interest being paid. Think about how much you need to pay for a new pickup today, then think about how much you might have paid 10 years ago. You would have paid out less in dollar amounts 10 years ago. In deciding how much to pay for the $500,000 worth of bonds, you need to determine how much less they are worth today. Three things should be considered in making any such determination. Clearly, time is an important factor. The further away the maturity date, the less the bond issue would be worth today. Other factors are harder to determine. Inflation does not occur at a regular or predictable rate. Once you have made your decision as to what the issue is worth, then if inflation escalates, you may have paid too much for the issue. If inflation rates are low, then you may benefit. Bonds usually pay out interest. This is what attracts investors in the first place. However, interest rates can also change, and that is something which cannot be predicted with certainty. Occasionally, there will be exceptions, but usually we expect our investments to increase in value over time. This is what we expect to happen with the money that we invest in a bond issue. Are there any ways of trying to determine a figure? If you invested $500,000 today, how much would you expect to have in 10 years' time? Clearly, a lot more than $500,000. In fact, there are mathematical tables that try to ascertain a present value based on the interest rate offered for the bond and the period to which the bond will be in force. Let us say that the interest rate was 8% and the bond value at maturity was $500,000 in 10 years. How much would you need to invest now with that interest rate to end up with $500,000 in 10 years? That is what the tables are trying to determine. This ends our first session on bonds. Thank you for watching and listening.